I want to spend the remaining time talking about how to prepare for a miracle. And we're going to look at the most famous miracle that Jesus did, probably one of the most famous miracles in the Bible, and that's when Jesus fed the 5,000. Now, he took one little boy's lunch and he used it to feed a multitude of people. They say 5,000 men, but we don't know if that probably didn't include the women and children, so it could have been a whole lot more. And this story, if you wanted to write this down across the top somewhere, this story really is all about how God can turn a little into a lot. How God can turn a little into a lot. Now, these are important principles because there are going to be a lot of times that you're going to need God to turn what little you have into a lot. God, I don't have that much. I don't have much energy, and I need you to turn what little I have into a lot. I don't have much finances, but I'm going to have to ask you, and I'm struggling with relationships or anything else where you've only got a little and you want to trust God to bring you a lot. These are going to be principles that are going to help see how God does that. Now, I want you to realize that Jesus never did miracles just to show off, like a magician. Hey, watch this one. You can show your friends at the next part. He never did anything like that. Every single time he did a miracle, he did it to teach a spiritual truth. And the spiritual truth he wanted to teach us is how to prepare for a miracle, because he can take a little and turn it into a lot. And this is very important as we start this whole idea about daring faith. Now, this miracle is so important. All four Gospels have this miracle in it. The only miracle that all four Gospels have. And they were so impressed with this miracle, and so many people were touched by this miracle, it was something that couldn't be denied. It happened. And there were thousands of people who saw it. It made all four Gospels. And, you know, when God says something 4 times, he expects us to listen. And in case you don't know the story of what we're talking about, Jesus goes out into the Judean desert and a large crowd follows him, and he is there teaching them all day. And at the end of the day, they're hungry. They are miles and miles from the nearest McDonald's. I guess in Israel it'd be the McDavid's. And so there's no food around where they are. The disciples come up to Jesus and say, you know, Lord, it's the end of the day. You need to send these people away so that they can go find some food. And I love what Jesus says. Jesus says, you feed them. And we feed them. How is that possible? It's not physically possible. It is extremely impractical. It's not humanly possible for the 12 of us, to feed that many people. So what's going on? Well, Jesus is performing a miracle to teach us 4 steps. And I told you during this campaign, we're going to see some miracles happen. And this is what Jesus is going to do as we prepare ourselves. First thing we need to do is that we have an unsolvable problem. And let me just be real blunt. If you don't have an unsolvable problem in your life, you don't need a miracle. You don't need a miracle. Kind of obvious. If you have a solvable problem, you just need to solve it. You need to take care of it. I was telling first service, I was at Publix the other day and I was checking out, and it's right next to where the scale is in there. And as I'm checking out, I notice an older gentleman go and get on the scale and he looks at it, and as he steps off, being the shy person I am, I asked him, was that good news? And he said, actually, just a few months ago, I had weighed 40 pounds more. Wow. And I said, did you lose it the right way? Not knowing if he had been sick or something. And he said, it was all diet and exercise. I said, so that really does work, huh? You know, there are certain things, you don't need a miracle, you just need to do it. Now, most of us, we just much rather do nothing and ask God to take care of everything. God, make me skinny. That would be the easier way to go. The disciples come to Jesus and they say, Lord, it's late. Everybody is hungry. Send them away. And so, you know, Jesus says, and I want you to look at this passage as we go through that again. When Jesus saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them, so he began teaching them. By this time, it was late in the day. So his disciples came. This is a remote place. It's a long ways away. Send the people away so they can go buy something to eat. Jesus said, you give them something to eat. And they said, that would take 8 months of a man's wages. They realized this is impossible. They had an unsolvable problem. Now, I want you to note the 3 things that they did. These are not in your notes. You may want to write these down in between. The disciples did 3 things that I do whenever I'm facing a situation like this, and you do this too, I would guess, and bet. And they're all in this passage. First thing they did was procrastinate. Anybody a good procrastinator? Yeah, when we have a problem we can't solve, we have a tendency just to put it off. We know we need to take care of it. We know something needs to happen, but we just put it off. We delay. We pretend like it doesn't exist. We look the other way. And it's in this passage where it says, by this time, it was late in the day. Now, the disciples have been watching. They know there's no food. They know there's nothing that can be done. Do they say something early on? Hey, you want us to order Domino? You know, what do you want to? We're planning for ahead. They didn't act proactively. They waited until it was late, and they procrastinated until it was too late. I wonder what problem in your life have you been procrastinating over? Because I want to tell you, procrastinating only makes a problem worse. It never solves the problem. You know, you can pretend all you want that, but the problem is still there. You can pretend that the problem in your body is not there. You can pretend like the relationship that you're struggling with is not there and keep pretending all the way down and procrastinate, but it never gets better. Second thing the disciples did was they tried to pass the buck. You know, that's what we do. We try to blame other people. It's not really my problem. It's your problem. It's your fault. It's their fault. So you blame others. And just remember how to spell blame. B-lame. Okay? And anytime you start blaming others, you're being lame. You don't need to do that. Disciples said, Jesus, send all these people away. They're passing off the responsibility. Let them go find the food. Let them go find something to eat. Because we didn't promise them any food, and we didn't invite them to come here to hear Jesus, but they kind of showed up, and it's time for them now to leave. Out of sight, out of mind. So they try to pass the buck. And then the third thing we do is we worry. Can I get a witness? We fret. We freak out. We don't know what's going to happen. Our brain goes through all kinds of stuff. And we can see the disciples They said, it's going to take 8 months of wages. Excuse me. They're freaking out about how could we possibly do this. That I don't know how it could happen. How are we going to get all that in? How are we going to order it? Who would we call? How would we get it here? Who's going to pull the permits? How are we going to get all this stuff done? And so they worry and worry. And I love what Jesus says to them. He says, no, I want you to feed them. Now here's the point. They're procrastinating. They're passing the buck. They're worrying. But what's the problem in this picture? They're standing next to Jesus. They have watched miracles in the past. They know who their God is. He has done countless miracles in the Old Testament. And yet they are so worried, there's no way I can do anything. I mean, Jesus was the one who could turn stones into bread if he wanted to. And he could easily feed everybody instantly if he wanted to. They're standing in the presence of the Son of God, and they're saying, Jesus tells us to feed them, and I don't know what to do. People of faith, we need to admit God's going to stick us in problems like that, where he's going to ask us to do something, and we have no clue how it's going to happen. By the way, anybody ever been asked by God to do something that seemed impossible? Because I will tell you, he will stretch your faith, and that is one of the biggest ways he will do it. He loves to put us in impossible situations so that we realize how limited we are, so that he can show us how unlimited he is. Moses said, I can't do that. I can't speak. Get somebody else. Jeremiah said, why me? As people of faith, we need to be more like Isaiah, who stepped out in faith and said, here I am, Lord. Send me. Use me. I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to trust you, and I am going to do what you've asked me to do. God says, I want you to do the impossible. And why does he ask that? Why does he ask us to even do the impossible? Because he wants to stretch our faith. When God asks you to do something you think is physically or financially impossible, it's to stretch your faith. So that's the first principle of the miracle. I've got to admit that I've got a problem that I feel and I'm facing that is unsolvable on my own. So the second thing I need to do is to give God what little I already have. Jesus says to his disciples, I want you to do a little reconnaissance mission. I want you to go out. How many loaves do you have? Go out and see. So they go through and they find out that there are 5 small loaves of bread and 2 fish. One little boy out of that massive crowd had packed a lunch. I will tell you, I don't think so. I think there was a lot more food that people are hiding. I think a lot of them were, shh, if we give it away, we won't have enough for ourselves, so let's not do anything. That's one of the things that happens. And let me just real quickly say, that's why we're doing this campaign right now. There are some people, when it comes to giving and being generous and this whole idea, they're already so full of faith, they don't need this campaign. They're going to give regardless. Then there's another group of this. It's kind of illustrated in what's not said in here. There's another group of people who are not going to give regardless. We can go through this campaign. They're not picking up a book. They're not attending anything. They're not listening to the sermons. they're not going to do it. And usually it's for three reasons. Number one, they're not going to give because they can't. Right now they can't. They're hurting. Something is going on in their life. They just can't right now. And that's fine. And we'll be a church to say, how can we help? But there are other people who won't give, who are very immature, who don't understand certain things like, what? The lights just don't come on automatically every time you flip that switch over there? It costs money to pay the bills, all that kind of stuff. I had no idea. And then we've got a third group, we'll just call them selfish, who say, I'm not giving because if I give to you, I won't have it for myself. So I'm guessing a lot of those people had food that they weren't willing to share. But then there's a third group of people that we're doing this campaign for. Those are the ones who are going to step out in faith. Those are the ones that are going to trust God, and they're going to make a commitment and say, God, I'm trusting you. And I'm going to give you what little I have, and I'm going to see what you do. That's why we're doing this campaign, is for those folks. So that little boy with his little bit of lunch was the one that stepped up and offered up what he had, and God took it and did a miracle with it. So, and again, Jesus didn't need what that boy had. He could have caused manna to fall from heaven. He'd done it before. He could have done it a million different ways. But I want you to know, this second principle of a miracle is God always starts with what I have. He wants us to be willing to offer. Now, I may not have much, but if I give it to God, God can do a lot with a little. I don't have much time, but here's what I do have. I don't have much in finances, but here's what I do. I don't have much talent, but here's what I do have. And God can take what His people give in faith and use it to change lives, even for eternity. So the boy brought his 5 loaves and the 2 fish. God always starts with what we have. John 6:6 says, not up here, but it says, Jesus asked this, how many loaves do you have out there? Only to test them. For he already had in his mind what he was going to do. He already knew what he was going to do. He tested them. Who's going to give something? And it's amazing, in a congregation that's been listening to God, listening to the Son of God all that time, teach and talk about life and so forth, when it came right down to it, one little boy had the faith and was willing to give what he had. I want you to write this down. It's an important truth I want you to remember. God always has the answer before I even know the problem. He always has the answer even before I know the problem. He knows what needs to happen even before I do. It wasn't a surprise to Jesus that people were getting hungry. It wasn't a surprise that it was time to feed. It wasn't a surprise he was going to do the miracle. But he knew what was going to happen, and he already had the answer before the problem was put out there. So why worry? I need to admit I've got an unsolvable problem. I need to give God what little I have. And then number 3, I need to put it all in the hands of Jesus. John's account of this miracle, it tells us a little detail that the disciple Andrew was the one who found the little boy who brought the sack lunch. And it wasn't much. It was just a little lunch. And then before it was all over, he brought it, but it kept getting bigger and bigger. Jesus blessed it, and he broke it, and he continued giving it to the disciples to set before the people. Now, you can say, what I have is not going to count. It doesn't matter. It's not that much. But God can use it. And now I don't have a whole lot of extra time, but one of the things about that little boy and what he did, he gave it what he had willingly, cheerfully, and immediately. He didn't hold it back. He gave it to God. Which takes us to the fourth key. That is that you need to expect God to multiply it. I give God whatever I have. I put it in the hands of Jesus. And I need to expect God is going to do something with that that is beyond what I could ever dream or imagine. We take up the offering. When I pray, I ask God to bless it and multiply it for His kingdom's use. Because God has ways of using what we bring and doing so much more than we realize. Our passage says everyone ate and had enough, and afterwards they collected 12 baskets full of leftovers. Everybody actually got to take home a doggy bag. I mean, there was so much left over. There were 12 baskets representing the 12 tribes. But this kid, I mean, if he brought all of this stuff home and had extra and came home and said, Mom, said, why didn't you eat? Or where'd you get all this food? Mom, I gave what little I had to Jesus. He blessed it. He multiplied it. And I have so much more. Okay, you go to your room till your father gets home and you're ready to tell the truth. Because that doesn't make any sense. So many of us, we try to make sense of the things of God. And God says over and over again, your ways are not my ways. Your thoughts are not my thoughts. I have so much more for you than you could ever ask or imagine. And many of us realize that God can do the impossible. That all things are possible with Him. God can do all those things, but hear this. He likes to do it through people. Jesus could have fed everybody, but He wanted to see who would come forward. That little boy brought up his what little he had, and he has become the hero down through the ages, still talked about 2,000 years later for his willingness, and God used what he brought. I'm going to tell you during this campaign, God is going to want to turn you and me into miracle-making machines. That when we give what we have and we trust it and put it in His hands and have faith and look forward to what He's going to do, He is going to do, because of our faith, He is going to show us what faith can do. Because He will take it and bless it and multiply it. And God wants to do that in so many ways in your life. And this miracle is so appropriate for our congregation right now because this community, and even America and our world, is starving for spiritual truth. And I believe God at this time is saying to Harvester, you feed them. And for so many of us, we would say, well, God, Idlewild's down there. They're much bigger than we are. Let them, tell them to go do that. Grace Fellowship is building another place over here. Let them do that. God is asking us, our 23 years of ministry here, and what has been, we're celebrating right now what has been the offering of so many in this church who have given their sack lunches so that we could even be here right now. And He wants to take this church to the next level. And He wants to know, you feed them. Are you willing to? First, you got to admit, that's a much bigger task than I could ever do. But I'll tell you what, I'll bring to you what I have. And I'm going to lay it in your hands. Then together we're going to watch God multiply what his people give. And we're going to do some amazing things together. I will tell you, there are so many areas of ministry that our first response since I've been the pastor here, and I've heard countless times, we don't have enough money to do that. We'd love to be able to do that, but we can't. Need a youth director. Oh, according to our finances, we don't have any money to do that. We've got almost $800,000 in a mortgage. Oh, we can't. We're already overflowing in this building. We already need to start it. Well, our finances say we can't even think about doing that. We need a roof on this main section. We've got water leaks that are coming in. Yeah, but that's $30,000. Let's just spread it out over 3 years. So many needs that are going on right now for us to be able to reach more people. And what would happen if every single one of us willingly realized the call for us to feed? And we brought what we had, realizing it's not much. But we put it in the hands of Jesus, and we're going to watch what he does with it. How many miracles, how many lives could be changed because of that? I'll tell you, as your pastor, I don't know. But I'm looking forward to seeing. And I hope you'll be fully immersed in this experience and that you won't let it pass you by. So with that, let me invite you to bow your heads with me. Oh God, we hear stuff like this and it all sounds good, but you know how we like to stay comfortable, even in the mess of our lives. And so many of us wish you would just take care of everything. That you would just make us skinnier and healthier and fix our finances and help me win the lottery and give me more of what I want. Lord, I pray that you would help us all realize that the things that we call comfortable in this world are only temporary. That there's a whole nother level of eternity we can't see. So lift our eyes to what you're calling us to do. That we would simply trust you and obey your word. Lord, for so many of us, there are areas that seem impossible and unsolvable. This morning we admit that we are powerless. But we also know that all things are possible with you. And so receive what little we have. We place our lives, our health, our finances, our faith, everything in your hands. As we begin this process, we look forward to see what you are going to do in and through your people. We look forward to seeing some amazing things. Father, as you continue to stretch our faith in the coming days, pray that you would become more real to us than anything else we face. As we experience your presence, may you continually hear praise for who you are as our loving Father. And we ask all this in Jesus' holy name. And all God's people said, Amen. Amen.